Welcome to the second Public Communications video conference. Our host for today's program will be Arnold Augustin, Manager of Television News Relations in the Public Communications Department of the church. Brother Augustin has over 17 years' experience as a TV news director, anchor, and reporter, and has also served as a bishop.
Priesthood leaders and public communication directors from throughout the United States and Canada are gathered in hundreds of locations to view this satellite conference. We appreciate the effort you're making today to consider the topic of church public communications. Actually, church public communication activities consists of two thrusts. First, media relations, the subject of today's conference. And secondly, community relations, a topic for future consideration. Each of you should have been given a copy of this booklet, which has been prepared to outline the material in today's presentation. We hope you'll refer to it during the video conference and use it as a reminder of what you'll learn today. The booklet lists our objectives for this presentation. Priesthood leaders, we sincerely hope that your public communication directors, through good media relations, can serve to help you in accomplishing the first great mission of the church, to consistently take messages about the Lord's church and gospel to every person in the bounds of your stewardship. You new PCDs, or public communication directors, we hope that through today's broadcast, you'll better understand how to prepare materials such as fact sheets, news releases, and story ideas, and then to get these materials broadcast or printed. We'll refer to this process as placement. Finally, you experienced PCDs. We've interviewed several of you throughout North America and will present portions of these interviews today. We hope that you'll pick up several new ideas which will benefit you in the ongoing efforts. We know some of you will have questions as we go along, so we plan to pause at 3 points during today's program to hear from you. Please feel free to phone in during these question and answer periods. Now we're about ready to begin, but first we'd like to call on Brother Robert Lundergan in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to lead us in prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we thy servants do meet together throughout many areas of the church to thank thee and to seek for thy blessings. We are grateful for the science and technology that enables us to meet in this way and to obtain the instructions and teachings of our leaders. We are so grateful for the restoration of thy church and kingdom here upon the earth, and that we are privileged to have the opportunity of furthering that great work. We are so grateful for the structure of thy church and kingdom, for the system of prophets, and for the revelation that they receive. And we especially are thankful for our prophet, President Ezra Taft Benson, and his counselors, the quorum of the 12 apostles, and all of the general authorities. May thy choice blessings be upon them, that they will have help and vitality in carrying out their important responsibilities. We are grateful for the efforts that have been put forward to prepare this particular meeting. We thank thee for all of those who have worked in its preparation, and pray for thy blessings to be upon them. May they be strengthened because of this sacrifice that they have made, so that they may be even more effective in the work that they are carrying out. We pray for thy inspiration to be with those who will speak to us and who will teach us. May they have thy special help to be with them. And may we be receptive of the message. May we become enthused and determined to become effective in improving the image of the church throughout the world. And may we recognize that it is all part of the missionary plan that we spread the gospel and teach it to all mankind. Now we pray for thy choice blessings to be upon this meeting, that it will be successful and that we will go forward with renewed determination to carry out thy work in the world. We pray in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Lundergan. We'll now begin this video conference by listening to Elder David D. Haight of the Council of 12 Apostles, who will summarize our commission in working with the news media.
My dear friends and co-workers, in this glorious involvement of proclaiming and teaching the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, those of us with some responsibility in our worldwide public communication efforts want each of you to know of our gratitude for your personal efforts and contribution. Hopefully, each of you enjoy your calling, thus becoming more effective. I have found from my own experience in dealing out in the world, and from my own experience with many, many stakes in presiding over the Scottish mission, and of course my present calling, that I enjoy the opportunity to meet people, whether they be a bus driver or top executive or newspaper publisher, to be able to tell and explain about the continuing success of this work, its organization, and its precepts. It's an honor to meet with you today by way of modern technology. We meet to discuss ways in which we can effectively serve the Lord through our public communications involvement. Last May, in a teleconference very similar to this one, many of you heard President Gordon B. Hinckley speak about media relations. At that time, he said that we need to share an accurate portrayal of the church with the world. He also said that he worries that we sometimes are not as successful in working with the media as we would like to be. You were then taught skills to help to accomplish your task. We hope that the training you received last year at that interesting teleconference has been of help to you. Since that time, many of you have had experience in working with the media. You play an important part in this great work. The church continues to grow at a rapid pace. The lives of people are blessed as our missionaries teach the truths of the gospel, which the prophet Joseph Smith helped to restore. It was in November 1831 at Hiram, Ohio, that a revelation was given through Joseph Smith the prophet during a special conference of elders of the church. The revelation was to become the preface to the doctrine, covenants, and commandments of this dispensation. In this revelation, the prophet was told that power would be given, quote, to lay the foundation of this church and to bring it forth out of obscurity and darkness, end of quote. Even before the church was organized, Joseph Smith was told that his name, quote, should be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds, and tongues, or that both good and evil spoken of among all people, end of quote. And so it has been, and continues to be in some circles today. The restored gospel has been and is spoken of for good and evil by observers, journalists, some historians, and detractors. During those first 100 years of the church, much of what was written and said about the church in the media was negative. But in the past 50 years, much of the media reporting about the church has been positive. Robert O'Brien, formerly a senior editor of Reader's Digest, said, "Their faith, like God, was with them. And the miracle is still with us today in this magnificent Salt Lake City, in your prosperous and powerful people, in your temples and great universities," end of quote. Lewis Moore, a Texas newspaper editor and an ordained Baptist minister, says that we as a church are enjoying very positive news coverage, even more favorable coverage than most churches. Our challenge is to convey accurate and newsworthy information about who we are to our news media in order to encourage accurate and balanced local media stories about us. We must learn to deal with the media effectively. We must organize our public communications councils and draw upon the human resources we have within our stakes and wards so as to effectively work with the news media and promote positive community relations. Though we at church headquarters work primarily with national news stories, we're mindful of the local stories that you at local level can deal with so effectively. The Public Communications Department at church headquarters is a resource to you as you need assistance. As we develop our effectiveness, there are several principles to keep in mind. First, if we want the people of the world to have the correct perception of the gospel, it is up to us to give them the correct perception. Critics and others usually speak about us, often inaccurately. In order to keep the information accurate, we must speak on our own behalf. On January 11th, 1987, only a few weeks ago, some inaccurate, demeaning statements were made about the church on CBS Network's Sunday Morning with Charles Kuralt. Immediately, our church director of public communications brought the matter to the attention of the president of the Columbia Broadcasting System in New York City, who is taking appropriate action. In similar situations, the church has responded immediately to the New York Times and Los Angeles Times, who had printed inaccurate stories. The church will not let demeaning stories go unchallenged and will demand appropriate action. Second, the best defense is a good offense. We need to actively place stories that are relevant, timely, and accurate. We need to sharpen our skills to learn what's newsworthy and of interest to the audience of a particular media outlet. We then need to identify church-oriented stories that fill those interests. We also must develop positive relationship with those who represent the news media. Most reporters will try to be fair if we provide timely, accurate, understandable information in the form that will meet their needs. If we are skillful in our preparation and presentation, the media will convey correct information about our beliefs, our activities, and the beneficial fruits of the gospel in the lives of faithful people. We must learn to make clear the relationship between what we do and what we believe. Our doctrine is more and more an element of news stories and is often wrongly portrayed by others. Our challenge is to clearly state the doctrine and demonstrate its fruits in lives that are examples of Christ-like service and that are even joyful in the face of adversity. Third, we need to seek and the help of the Lord in all that we do. In section 49 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord promised Sidney Rigdon and Parley P. Pratt, as they go out to teach the gospel, quote, "Behold, I will go before you, and I will be in your midst, and you shall not be confounded," end of quote. As we do the Lord's work in whatever capacity, that promise holds true for us. He will be there to help us. He does not desert those who are striving to serve him in righteousness. To you, devoted servants who are working to bring the church out of obscurity through the power of the media, know that the Lord will bless your efforts. and is there to strengthen you and guide you. I know that the Lord will bless you and bless your work efforts as you do His work. I now introduce to you Richard P. Lindsay, Managing Director of the Public Affairs and Public Communications Department of the church.
Brothers and sisters, we're grateful to be joined with you in this exciting part of the Lord's latter-day work. Millions of people will come to a better understanding, appreciation, and acceptance of the church and the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ because of your faithful labors. We add our welcome to priesthood leaders and public communications directors who are gathered for this training session. This gathering is a witness to the marvels of the communications age in which we live. We recognize that you regional representatives and stake presidents are so critical to the success of public communications in the church. We also note that bishops and branch presidents in many areas have recognized the importance of public communications to the success of their efforts as priesthood leaders. We appreciate so much your calling energetic and faithful people to public communications assignments, and you're giving them direction and supporting their efforts. At church headquarters, we are continually impressed with the efforts of many public communications directors across the world. In many thoughtful, prayerful, and often unique ways, they help keep the public informed about the church, its doctrines, people, and activities, and build bridges of love and understanding. Not long ago in Henderson, Kentucky, a new chapel was being constructed. The branch president, along with the stake and branch public communications directors, met regularly and planned events and prepared a campaign to provide news coverage and focus public interest on this important project. They prepared a series of radio announcements highlighting elements of our belief and our unique church programs. Libby Freck, the local public communications director, gathered facts for a series of newspaper articles extending from the groundbreaking to the open house and to the dedicatory service. She printed 1,000 invitations which were personally delivered by the members and followed up on the media coverage. As a result of the efforts of inspired priesthood leaders and thoughtful public communications workers, some 200 non-members attended the open house. The effect was added teaching opportunities for the missionaries, and thousands of others became more aware of the church and had a better understanding of our teachings because of what they read and what they heard in the media reports about the church and its message. Last fall, Latter-day Saint young women throughout the world launched helium-filled balloons carrying messages of peace and love. This activity won worldwide attention because local priesthood leaders, young women leaders, and public communications directors worked together. The effort resulted in coverage on national and local television news reports, interviews of young women on local radio talk shows, and massive local newspaper coverage accompanied by pictures and interviews. More awareness and understanding of the church and its message through effective use of the media is the result when priesthood leaders do the following: call effective and energetic public communications directors. See that they are adequately trained in their callings. Meet regularly with them to plan, to set goals, and to provide the budget for successful media relations efforts in your area. Invite the public communications director to appropriate council meetings to keep them informed, and encourage their suggestions and improve their plans. There's always been curiosity about who we are and what we stand for in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From the earliest days, the press and public have had a real interest in the story of the Restoration. Even in the face of criticism and misunderstanding, Joseph Smith welcomed the interest. In the May 16, 1842 edition of Times and Seasons, a newspaper published by the church, the prophet Joseph Smith wrote, "We can assure the interested newspaper editors that we shall be most happy to put them in possession of any information that they may require pertaining to our society, as we have always courted publicity and investigation and choose light rather than darkness." The prophet Joseph Smith again made this point in his own history, as we read from the Pearl of Great Price. I have been induced to write this history to disabuse the public mind and to put all inquirers after truth in possession of the facts as they have transpired in relation both to myself and the church, so far as I have such facts in my possession. In that spirit, the First Presidency in December of 1983 urged that our public communications efforts be based on positive stories about the church and its teachings. The First Presidency letter indicated that, quote, much of what has been presented has been accurate and favorable to the church, unquote. The letter also noted that in those areas where there was negative reporting, quote, this in itself may be an opportunity, unquote, to clarify what we believe. The First Presidency also indicated that in responding to any negative coverage, we should, quote, keep the response in the form of a positive explanation of the doctrines and practices of the church, end quote. It is upon this premise that we can base an effective media relations program. It is our prayer, brothers and sisters, that at the conclusion of this training, each of us will be inspired and better prepared to take advantage of our numerous opportunities and to help this important part of the Lord's work to move ahead.
I think that this is the kind of story that many times we dream about.
Currently, the LDS Church is on the air 5 nights a week. We're on for 30 minutes a night.
We did a really good story on a welfare system within the church. But the real capper was, in talking with him over and over again, I kept emphasizing, we live the 10 Commandments, especially the first two. After you live the first two, the rest of them are easy. And Lee titled that right across the front page of the religion section, They Live the 10 Commandments.
In the past couple of months, we've had Danny Ainge, Greg Kite, Bruce Hurst, and Trevor Maddich did a wonderful talk show on being professional athletes in LDS, which was very successful.
And the messages sometimes are pretty subtle, but there's always a gospel principle, usually something like repentance, improving your life, how you can be better. Our purpose is not to teach the missionary lessons on this program, but to give people a good feeling about the members of the church and about the program.
The Daytona News Journal, one of their reporters contacted me from material that I had sent in and came over and interviewed the elders herself. And we had a full page in the news on those two particular elders.
We had this half-hour talk show. It was marvelous. We didn't have the questions ahead of time, but the questions that she asked were so conducive to really sharing a lot of elements of the gospel. And that program was carried on a wide, clear channel to many states.
And this PCD put in the newspaper in those 3 little towns, Relief Society homemaking meeting, public invited, here's what we're going to do. They had more non-members than members show up at the Relief Society homemaking meeting.
Next, they called me about the motherhood and parenting. And then right after the show, I was just ready to leave, and the assistant producer ran up and said, you're my greatest contact. I've got to get you on another show. We want to have talk about families and things like this. And I thought, this is great. And she said, I hope I'm not burdening you. I hope I'm not, you know, overexposing your church. Hey, it's fine. No problem. That's fine. We'll be happy to accommodate and get whatever guests you can. But it's the rapport that you establish, I think, that's very important.
Some messages of peace were released this morning in a rather unusual way with balloons. Some 500 area girls, all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, took part in a balloon releasing ceremony, a ceremony that was repeated in hundreds of places around the world.
Service is a basic principle of effective media relations. When you're involved in church public communications work, you have an opportunity for service in 2 ways: service to the church and service to your local news media contacts. Developing a good relationship with representatives of your local news media outlets serves the church by helping to bring the local church and its programs out of obscurity. It gives you an opportunity to highlight the fruits of the gospel, such as youth programs, the educational system, the welfare program, the health code, and emphasis on strong families. It also allows us to explain the doctrines upon which these programs are based. Good rapport with media increases the church's visibility and enhances its credibility. You public communication directors serve the church and its local units by being available as a resource to the local priesthood leader. Keep them apprised of issues which are of interest to the media. Keep them informed of what's going on in your local areas. Seek his approval of sensitive items before submitting them to the media. Act as a sort of a press secretary, arranging interviews and talk shows, developing responses on important subjects which illustrate the fruits of the gospel. And through training, you can help him become an effective local spokesman for the church. You serve local media contacts by providing them accurate, relevant, and newsworthy information about the church. Doing this establishes you in their eyes as a very good source. And now and then you'll even want to give them some tips on non-LDS items. That will add to your credibility and cement your relationship. You're actually helping them to do their job. When they have questions and need information, they'll know someone's there, ready and willing to serve them.
What you have to be is a person that has real interest in other people. And when you really show an interest in them, the fact that they have a child that's going to the hospital and you follow up the next day to make sure the child was okay, the fact that they just got a very good story, a good placement for a story, and you let them know that they did a good job, or the fact that maybe their desk got moved around at the newspaper, and you ask why, what does that mean, and you pay attention to their personal needs. Then what you do is respond to them as people, and you say, hey John, hey Jack, hey Peter, have you thought of this, or what about that, or did you think of this, or this was a good thing. And now another thing that I do is, since I now know these people, I will call them and say, you know, did you know this was happening out here? This might be useful for you. It has nothing to do with the church, but I position myself as a resource on newsworthy items. And the point is to demonstrate to them that you understand what the local news agenda is. So if you don't know how to write, don't worry about it. All you have to do is know how to talk, and go in and talk with people and meet them.
Later in the program, we'll give you some concrete suggestions on how to do this. But for now, your role is to serve both the church and the media. You'll serve the church best when you best serve the media. One way to serve the church best is to be organized.
But one thing I think is vital, we've got to remember that they are not the church news. They don't publish all of our stories. So we need to go to them with that perspective and find out what their news agenda is and see if we can match that. And try to imagine what their story hook might be on or their story angle might be on what we're presenting to them, and maybe suggest that to them.
So it's thinking of the angle and thinking in terms of what will the editor think of this story? And where you might be thinking how great your story is, the editor's sitting there and he's thinking, well, is this going to increase my circulation? He's thinking in terms of dollar signs.
That rapport between the member of the church, the public communications director, and the person in broadcasting or in the media, that rapport is really the key. That's where it starts. And we try to maintain that rapport at a good level at all times in working with the television station. We want them to know, for example, that we are going to be professional in the way we handle what we do for them. It's going to be there when they need it, on time. There'll be no problems. We'll be organized. We won't have to badger them or bother them about things. We'll come in and do our job, because in that way it makes their job easier. And that, I think, is the key that public communication directors want to always keep in mind. The biggest part of your job, first, know the people in the media, and secondly, do your job in such a way that it makes their job easier. When you provide the information that they need to do their job, you're helping them, and therefore you're more likely to get time or space for the church.
Quite often you'll find in a news operation that people begin to depend on a pool of individuals who are easily accessible and who communicate with you clearly and honestly. if you can move yourself into that sort of position in a newsroom by contacting the individuals who make the decisions in the newsroom, the editors, the assignment editors, the producers, on a personal basis, let them know you are there, let them know what information you have to offer and how you can help. Give some specific examples, give your numbers at which you can be contacted, give backup individuals that can be contacted in case of your absence. Be open and pleasant and provide good information. And I think that people will begin to depend on you and call you in the instances where your expertise or your information is required.
But you got to learn a few things. Number one, you stay away from them certain hours of the day. You absolutely stay away because they got too much to do. Number two, you learn a little bit about them as people.
I've got good contacts, and primarily in the TV stations, also in newspapers, but in the television producers, if they know that you're a good resource, they will always come to you.
We realize, of course, we're not on the level of like the press secretary for the President of the United States, but we need to function somewhat like that, in that when we see a story that needs responding to or something needs to be done in our area, we need to take the initiative. If the priesthood leader is too busy to give us a quote or write out a story or reply, we can take it on our own to go ahead and do that and get his approval. And many times we've done that and the stories have gotten in. Otherwise, if we wait, our leaders are so busy that we've got to take the initiative and act as their press secretaries.
So the way you handle that is by keeping the priesthood leader in the loop from the very, very beginning.
And the priesthood interaction and involvement is really vital to what we do, because without the prayer and without priesthood leadership involvement, it still won't work. We're just going out on our own. So the way we do it here locally is every time I send out anything to the stake PCDs, a copy of that material goes to the mission president, the regional representative, and all the priesthood leaders, namely the stake presidents. They're aware of what we're doing. At first, for about a year, perhaps the material didn't get read, but now it's getting read, and I'm getting calls, and they're asking me questions. So they're involved in what we're doing, and they're approving everything that the stake PCDs are doing.
I think it's very important that any priesthood leader, whether it be a stake president or a bishopric or a regional representative or someone else, be closely involved in public communications and be closely associated with certainly the stake PCD in my case, and ward PCDs where possible, to make sure that they're putting the best foot forward in every possible way.
Now, I know without any doubt that when the priesthood leadership gets personally involved in leading, then things happen.
I feel real good. I feel that our regional representative is supporting us. I feel that the stake presidents are supporting us. And when you know you have their support, then you're willing to work that much harder.
I think one of the basic things that it's going to take, is, besides the enthusiasm and the support of the people, it's got to have some funding and financing. I think it's important that people get behind that and realize that for not very many dollars, a lot can be accomplished if we shop and do things right. And the leadership and the financing is what will make it work.
And then you say, now, here's what I want to do. What are the events you have coming up? How can we put that in the paper? And how can we help the missionaries? And that can take as much as 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 conversations with the priesthood leader, because remember, the priesthood leader, particularly the stake president, has an absolute tidal wave of have-tos coming at him. He has to announce this, he has to get this program underway, he has to check up on that, he has a million things he has to do. So what you do is, first of all, establish a relationship of trust and teach him that you will not misrepresent him should an issue come up that has to be spoken to. Then what you do is you say, now, here's what I'm going to do for you so you don't have to worry about it. Just tell me it's okay and I'll go get it done. Then you make sure you do it so that he can depend on you. Then you basically start getting proactive.
So in summary, PCDs, be a resource to your local priesthood leader and establish a positive working relationship with local editors and reporters. In doing so, learn all you can about their interests and needs, and give them some ideas and information that will not only enhance the church's visibility, but will be of interest to the media and the public.
I think we have to understand the media, particularly news and public affairs channels. We have to understand what their job is and how they do it. I think we have to understand that our purpose is to serve them. They are not to serve us. We are basically to become good sources of information for them.
Well, I called the reporter that was responsible for that. I said, you know, you did pretty good coverage on that. You were pretty balanced. Took him to lunch, and I said to him, what are you trying to accomplish, and what is your news agenda? What are you trying to do, and what information do you need? What do you consider newsworthy? And then I'd call him every once in a while and said, hey, did you see this, or you did a good job with that. And then I'd say, by the way, the Mormons are doing this sort of thing. Is this the sort of thing you're interested in? And you'd always package that just so that when you said it, there was a hook on it. Like, you'd have a conversation about an article he'd written in the paper, and then I said the other day, I said, by the way, he just went to Central America to study the people in Central America. And I said, Gus, oh, by the way, the first black elder from Atlanta is going to be going on a mission soon. Is that the sort of stuff you're interested in? He about climbed through the telephone. He wanted it so badly. You see, you got them hungry, and they think that you're trying to help them, which you really are trying to do. Then you become a partner with them.
You've been watching priesthood leaders and public communication directors interacting. Now let's take a few minutes for phone calls. Please let's limit the calls during this session to questions about interaction between PCDs and priesthood leaders. We'll have a chance to discuss functional media relations a little bit later. While you take a moment to think about questions, please look at this. This is a new public communications planning and budgeting form. This form is available through the Public Communications Department in Salt Lake City. You'll find it invaluable in planning your program and budgeting for the year. Right now, I'd like to introduce you to members of our panel today who will be answering your questions. Please give us a call. Let me first introduce to my immediate left Brother Jerry Cahill, Director of Public Affairs for the church. Next is President James Johnston of the Pocatello, Idaho West Stake. And next, Sister Kit Poole, Assistant Area Public Communications Director in Southern California. Now, let's take the first call. Hello, caller. Where are you calling from?
This is Don Russell with the Kearns, Utah West Stake.
Hello.
I'd like to know how much annual budget should be appropriated for media relations, and also just what is this budget used for?
President?
I think every situation is going to vary greatly. If you're going to have anything at all, you've got to be purchasing supplies such as stationery and stamps and photographic supplies, and it's going to depend on how much of those things you use. Could be a small budget, could be a large budget, especially if we have a newspaper insert or something where we need a lot of additional dollars to be spent.
Does that answer your question, Brother Russell?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much for calling. President, I think this will be a dual question for you and Sister Poole. The question often arises, how do we strengthen the priesthood leader in seeing the value of media relations?
As has been pointed out already in our presentation, we have a great mission to perform. We have things we've got to do, and if we will help a stake president or other people, other persons like this to feel comfortable in presenting themselves to the media, we'll have a much better presentation.
Sister Poole?
Well, and I think the best thing that we can do for a stake president is to get a nice front page story on the church that really impresses him. And then if you can get a good quote from him in the story, and if you take it and put it in every bulletin in the wards and in the stake, that is impressive, and it helps him to realize the importance of the public communication program. We did an interview with missionaries in Orange County at one time, and the mission president told us that that was the best door opener that he'd had the whole time he'd been mission president. So I think that if we can impress upon him that this is strengthening the image of the church in the community and softening the doors for our missionaries as they come.
What should we do if we encounter a situation where a priesthood leader oftentimes is shy and rather reserved? How can we, President and Sister Poole, work with this individual?
Well, maybe an example would be helpful. When I was first called to have some responsibility with public communications, the sister who was heading up that was the PCD. She actually suggested what I might say, and it made me sound so good. It was very easy to sign my name to that. And I think if people who are comfortable with this can help stake presidents and other priesthood leaders to do this, it'll make the job a lot easier for everyone.
And introduce them to the spokesman training and give them some spokesman training so that they are relaxed and at ease when they come before the reporter. And provide them with background material that will be helpful to them when they do the interview, and then they will, and when they impress upon them that the reporter is not an enemy. He just wants information. This is a job that he has to do, and so that he will be relaxed when he goes for the interview.
Arnie, often the public communications director's best service will be to anticipate the questions that are likely to be asked. That's fairly by knowing what the topics are that are of interest about the church in a particular situation. You can almost anticipate every question that a reporter will ask, and then you can prepare materials that will help the priesthood leader formulate his answers.
Great. We have another caller. Hello, caller. Would you state your name and give us the location you're calling from today, please?
Yes, this is Brother Clark. I'm in the East Mill Creek North Stake, and I'd like to know which of the priesthood leaders, suppose you're in a region and you have 4 stakes, which of the priesthood leaders should act as a spokesman to interface with the media?
President?
It would appear that the person would be appointed by someone like the regional representative to act as the spokesman for the church in the Pocatello area. I've received that assignment from my regional representative on a multi-regional basis, and until that assignment would change, I guess that'd be my area of responsibility.
I see. Let's move to another area just momentarily, to talking about budget. How do we appropriate funds for budget? How much do we put in budget? How is that started, President?
Well, we determined in terms of budget needs the basic things that we wanted. We got that taken care of, and then a couple of years ago we had a very successful insert. And it's been interesting as budget has been coming in this year. We told the stake presidents in our multi-region that it would be the same as it was last year. They've sent in extra dollars in many instances because they've been so pleased with what we've done.
Great. We have another caller. Hello, caller. Would you please state your name and give us the location you're calling from?
This is Samuel Bailey, Corvallis, Oregon.
Brother Bailey, your question, please.
How can the local PCD and the local priesthood leader best plan together?
I think that's a dual question. Sister Poole, why don't we hear from you first?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to meet often. I see that the best things happen when there's a monthly meeting. And I think that they should work together, that the PCD should, everything that the PCD plans and does should have the approval of the local priesthood leader. It's a matter of informing the priesthood leader. This is sometimes public communications is a new program in the church. Therefore, the priesthood leader needs to be informed in every aspect of the program and the importance that it is in improving and strengthening the image of the church.
Mm-hmm. President?
I find that I have so many responsibilities with my church calling that I need the help coming in from my PCD to keep me working on the areas that confront us. And so sometimes he has to get on my agenda a little bit, and it's very easy to get there if he'll remind me that he's there.
Great. Thank you. At this point, we'll share some suggestions with you on working with the media. You've seen a sample of what other public communication directors have been able to accomplish, and the foundation principle has been set that through your work, you serve the church as well as the media. Now let's talk about the nuts and bolts of what it is you actually do. Working with the media can be exciting. It takes initiative and some creativity. It is a substantial job, to say the least. It involves finding out what newsworthy local church activities are going on, becoming familiar with the media in your area, and following the direction of your priesthood leaders. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, preparing and placing information about the church. Another basic principle of effective public communications is that of drawing upon the power of the Spirit to help guide you. Prayer is most important. Pray about your public communications work. As Elder Haight said, the Lord will be there to help you as you work with the news media. That's what many public communication directors have found.
I know that I never go to an interview without first asking the Lord to be with me.
we've had many unusual and wonderful things happen here.
And you have to go about it prayerfully. You have to always have guidance, because believe me, a lot of things will happen when Heavenly Father wants them to happen, the way He wants them to happen, if you are making yourself available to Him in a humble way. On the other hand, you can be out for ego stimulation or strokes, and nothing is going to happen. But if you do your job prayerfully, it may not turn out the way you thought it will turn out, but it will turn out the way Heavenly Father wants it to turn out.
I don't think we can underestimate the power of prayer in working in public communications, that the hearts of the editors will be softened and that they will see the value of the story.
Prayer first. Nothing works without that. PCD initiative, priesthood leader involvement, preparation and presentation of what you're going to do. And of course, all those do equal success. That is the formula. But without the first one, prayer, none of it works. You get it out of kilter and out of balance. It won't work for you. You start going in circles. So I discovered this, and this is what we try to teach all of our stake and ward PCDs here locally, and this is, I think, why we've been successful here.
After praying like it all depends on the Lord, work like it all depends on you. Materials you can prepare should be based on a good story idea. Those story ideas can be transmitted to your local contacts through the newspapers, radio and television stations, local magazines, and other news media with fact sheets and press releases. Before we talk about fact sheets and press releases, let's talk about what a good story actually is. A good story idea can come from church activities, events, programs that we as the usual church member often take for granted. We may not see the news value of a story because we might just be too close to it. For example, visiting teaching or home teaching programs. To the editors, those are very unusual stories, very interesting, while to us, perhaps routine.
Mormons are almost a walking feature story. Every Mormon has so much that you can write about them. I always enjoy those. A number of stories that you could approach your local editor or religion editor about. One would be the low rate of cancer amongst Mormons. Cancer is a very big issue today, and it's a grave concern, and yet the LDS Church has a lower cancer rate. You might mention that. You might want to introduce your editor or religion editor to some of your missionaries who are out on the 2-year missionary work, but presented in such a way that it's not just a routine story. Here are these two people. You could have a story idea such as, here are two people who are giving 2 years of their lives at a time when most of the youth in America seem very troubled. There's a lot of drug addiction. Why are these fellows not into what the rest of the world is into? You could present a story idea along the lines of baptism for the dead. I think that is fascinating.
I think the editor is looking for something that will be of use to his readers, something that will pique their interest, something that is unique.
Another excellent source of story ideas is found in our welfare efforts. To us, something as routine as canning tomatoes made national news when the President of the United States singled out the church welfare program as an example of how private sector initiatives can address major social issues. The newsworthiness of our welfare efforts continues to remain relevant today. Finding a good news story may be facilitated by a PCD interviewing local church members who are involved in newsworthy activities. A PCD could interview the stake or ward genealogy expert, and then from that interview, write up a fact sheet or news release. Interviewing church members who can relate to the public will be an excellent source of good story ideas. So what are the basic elements of a good news story? News is defined as that which is unique, out of the ordinary to the general public, and that which has some relevance to human needs and concerns, or which asks important questions or even provide worthy answers for those concerns. Additionally, news generally focuses on what's happening currently, locally. Editors are much more interested in that which has just happened or which is about to happen than they are in events or programs which are out of date. They're much more interested in that which is happening in their own communities than in communities that they don't serve. They're interested in things that impact their community in some significant, unique way.
We need to plan so that we say, not only are we going to respond to negative stories and put out fires, because that's very non-productive, but we have an objective media program that we're, in space language, ahead of the curve, that we're out there with the information, that we're giving them information, and we're not just responding. All of these things are very, very important. They're all our responsibilities, which is an enormous undertaking. And I guess if I could say one thing to our public communications people, I would say be brave and be planners.
My feeling is that our messages should be oriented towards practical, substantive issues, things that people really want to know, rather than ideological messages that are serving our interests. We should be thinking about the audience, what the audience is in need of.
Discovering what kinds of news ideas are relevant to your community is very simple. Reading the local newspapers, listening or watching the broadcast news media will help you discover the local news agenda by which editors and reporters are motivated.
First of all, you need to know the kind of paper you're dealing with. Are you dealing with a weekly? Are you dealing with a daily? Are you dealing with a semi-weekly? You need to know what the approach of that newspaper is. You need to know if that newspaper sees itself as for the whole community, if it's a kind of newspaper that deals only in certain subjects. But once you begin to do your homework, you need to really sit down and read the paper first. Don't ever go to a newspaper office without having first read the newspaper and know a little bit about the basic content and the basic approach the paper takes. It also helps to understand the structure of the newspaper, and most newspapers are structured in about the same way, regardless whether it's the LA Times, the Houston Chronicle, or the Plano Star-Courier, or the San Marcos News.
The things that I would suggest for you, if you want to get your information on the air in a broadcasting organization, there are a number of things. One is be familiar with the media in your town. There are a number of things within that. The programs, the producers, the style in which they broadcast things, and the type of information that they like to use. First of all, the programs. There are not only news broadcasts, there are special features, there's public service announcements, there are a variety of vehicles for you to get your message across to people. For those programs, there are producers, and there may be, the prominent talk show hosts, but you can bet behind every one of those people there is a producer that really wields more power as far as what kind of information gets on and how it gets on. So you need to find out individually who it is that's responsible for that information that's going on in that broadcast.
I said, go down to the editor of the weekly newspaper and simply say, show me how your newspaper works. I don't know anything about this business. Show me what it is. We added up the number of people in the 3 wards that were covered by that newspaper. We have about 1,500 to 1,600 people that are potential customers of your newspaper. First flag. Buy. 1,600 people are going to buy my newspaper, maybe. And I sort of am the representative. What are your needs? The editor put everything down. He happened to be the owner. Took the guy on a tour of the newspaper, offered him to write a weekly column, which he began writing. He did in his column a story on the local genealogy library. That story was picked up by the Washington Post. It was a 2-page double-truck story about the genealogy library in Washington, D.C. in the 1970s. Local. It's right here. That library in Salt Lake can come right to your living room with a microfilm. All you have to do is go to this address, and it's yours. And Sally Sue from Tucker did it. And here's Sally Sue sitting at the microfilm machine doing it. That gets things in print and on the air.
For example, newspapers and radio and television stations are usually reporting on problems facing young people. Then you can collect, write, and transmit to the news media information which tells about our youth programs, how we, as Latter-day Saints, are working with our young people. Such a story idea could read something like this. Mormon leader says chastity is answer to local teen pregnancy problem, or Mormon youth play basketball rather than do drugs, or local alcohol-free New Year's Eve dances solves the drinking and driving problem for Mormon teenagers. You need to be aware of what's going on in your ward or stake. Develop a nose for news.
The church has so much to offer in terms of substance, the real issues, the kinds of things that we read about in the paper every day, my goodness, in terms of the health and the lifestyle questions that we all face, the church has some good answers on. And so we should go to talk about those things. The impact of religion on health, the impact of religion on relationships, the impact of religion particularly on marriage, are all topics that we as Latter-day Saints can address and make sense with. And our message can be very powerful through those channels of local news and public affairs.
As you sit in sacrament service and your hand goes up to sustain or release someone, you've got to think, now, is this a newsworthy event going on here? Is a local Relief Society president being released? Is there a new member of the bishopric? Are there new missionaries coming into the ward? These are all newsworthy events.
To help you become better informed, perhaps your priesthood leaders will invite the public communication directors to sit in on ward or state council meetings. That way they'll find out what's really going on in your ward or stake that might be newsworthy. The bottom line basically is this: you need to know what's going on in your ward or stake.
It's easy to find out about things watching the bulletin boards, and you should be attending your ward council meetings too. So that it's never a question of, is there anything to go in the news media this week about the church? It's, well, which one should I choose? Or sometimes we'll put several in an article together because there are so many things going on.
Look at the community that are involved in your ward. Look at the attitudes of the people. See what areas they need strength. Perhaps they need to have a stronger testimony of the fact that religion plays a real important part in the lives of people, and it really makes a difference. Then, after you look at the needs of the community, you need to plan on just which ways you can most effectively meet those needs. Will it be most effective if you have stories about members of your ward that have have had struggles and have surmounted those struggles? Would it be most effective if you would have seminars? We had a seminar in our stake recently that had financial planning, a marriage seminar, many of those things. First, you need to gauge the community that you serve and ask the Lord to help you understand just how to meet the needs of those people, and ask Him to help you to be creative to meet those needs.
Other considerations to keep in mind include, are people in the community involved? Is it fresh? For example, a new stake president or the announcement of a new chapel groundbreaking. Is there an unusual twist or slant to a story? Perhaps there's an Asian missionary which is now serving in America, or a 100-year-old member of the church with 100 living descendants. Are well-known people involved? Perhaps the mayor's attending a family banquet or groundbreaking. Will it elicit empathy or some kind of emotion from people? For example, an act of heroism by a member or a youth project which serves the community. That makes a good story. Such stories are definitely newsworthy, and they should be told.
If you want to write story ideas, if you want to do things in your local paper, look around you. Look at the people that are interesting. Your stake president, a member of your ward, somebody has a farm, one thing or another. There are interesting things all around you all the time. And then put it down on paper and go in and talk to the newspaper.
And so I decided, since we have so many professional athletes that are LDS in our area, that this would be a good way to get into the media. So several occasions we've had Danny Ainge and his family talk about family home evenings for family unity. In the past couple of months, we've had Danny Ainge, Greg Kite, Bruce Hurst, and Trevor Matich did a wonderful talk show on being professional athletes in LDS, which was very successful, very, very successful.
You have an opportunity to keep writing more stories about the genealogical research and how it helps the public in general, and it brings the name of the church to the public, because they are indeed interested in the second most popular hobby in the United States, which is genealogical research.
I thought that we needed to have some story in the paper about the Mormon women and what we do and what our responsibilities are as women in leading organizations. So I phoned them and asked them if they'd like to know what the role of Mormon women was. And so they came out and did this story, full-page story, interviewed about 6 outstanding women in Orange County. And I told them how women in the church learn great executive skills through their opportunity to serve as Relief Society presidents, primary presidents.
When I think about some of the best story ideas that folks gave me, I think about Percy Giblin and Dean Baxter and some of the folks in Houston who would come in and that we would sit there and we'd talk about the Mormon faith. I think one of my favorite stories was a story about the baptism for the dead. I think this is a concept that is very much misunderstood by the general public, yet is fascinating if it is presented in the right way. I remember when Howard Hughes died, you had, of course, the excitement and all the controversy surrounding the Mormon will, and who was going to get the money and all of that. And one of my LDS contacts came in the office, and we started talking about the fact that Howard was not LDS when he died, but that he would eventually have the option by being baptized for the dead, or someone would have him baptized for the dead. And that became a spin-off point for a fascinating story. I had lots of folks, non-LDS as well as LDS, say to me that they finally understood the concept of baptism for the dead by picking up on the hook, on the angle of Howard Hughes was not a Mormon when he died, but he will have that option in the near future.
For Relief Society homemaking meetings, sometimes we've had as many 25 non-members attend Relief Society homemaking meetings just from reading about it in the newspaper. And there's so many good homemaking classes going on all the time in all the wards. If they would just realize that these are really good public communication opportunities and write about them, and they'll just be surprised. Not only do people see them and come on their own sometimes, but then it makes it so easy for the members, the sisters, to invite their neighbors and their friends. Did you read about this in the paper? And then they will attend with them. It makes it much easier.
So what we do here in Atlanta is basically read various parts of the newspaper, like the lifestyle section, or the city and state section, or they have a special section here called science and technology, and they have a section on you know how they have these features, one day a week sort of thing. And we read that, and each of the public communications directors has been trained to pay attention to what the writer says.
Community newspapers are generally very interested in, say, a local dentist or local teacher being called as a new bishop, and the unpaid service this bishop will donate, or free workshops at the branch genealogy library, or a stake play which the public is invited to. A working knowledge of the media is helpful.
We tend to underestimate the power sometimes of the small local newspapers. But I have found that they are hungry for news, and, you know, perhaps they have a circulation of from 10 to 30 to 40,000 people. And I have found many times you send in good pictures, and if you send in a good story, I have had quite a few of mine where they gave me the byline and just printed it word for word. And that can happen because they don't always have as much news as the big major newspaper does.
Now that you have some story suggestions, some ideas to work with the media, you need to research the media. Identify who they are. Check TV and radio guidebooks and directories, the yellow pages or the phone book. Some public libraries carry media listings which indicate the size and type of the audience, the names of editors to contact, and so on.
Now that's how you do public communications in my mind. What you do is you come in and you say, now how is the church perceived here? What is my market? Who am I going after? And then you identify the kind of papers that go after that market. And then what you do is you try to figure out what is it that they're going to respond to.
You need to remember that newsrooms and broadcasting organizations are very busy places, and the people tend to be under a great deal of stress. So when you contact them, if you've done your research and if you're organized, you'll have a lot better luck with them. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not approachable. I can think probably that 4 times out of 5, someone will call me with something on the phone, and in some way will use it. But these are the people who are pleasant and who are organized and who know what we do, and so they know how to present it to us. So don't be discouraged if you're that 1 out of 5 that gets a no. Come back again with another event or another activity, or maybe there's another angle to that activity or event that you are currently promoting. So don't give up. Be persistent.
In terms of radio, are they in all music format? What is their age group? Who are they after? Are they playing rock and roll music? Are they playing easy listening music? Are they a talk format? Are they a news radio format? That's going to help you in determining if that station is appropriate.
There's a certain structure that you need to follow, but who you approach differs on the size of the paper. If you're going to go to a large metropolitan paper, then you really will start with your religion editor. Newspapers historically, for the past 20 years, have started beefing up their religion coverage. And almost all the major metropolitan papers across the country now have good religion editors. I've known most of them through my work with the RNA, the Religion News Writers Association, and know that the people who are in place in most of the metropolitan papers today are really competent and really want to do a good job. And those are the folks that you want to meet in your large cities. Now, on a smaller newspaper, the chances are that most papers the paper in your area will not have a specific religion editor, somebody whose whole job is devoted to working with religion. So what you need to determine is who will be covering this subject that you're going to be approaching them about.
Forms for listing the media and making a profile of each paper or station are available through your zone manager or the Public Communications Resource Center in Salt Lake City. Or you may want to simply develop a card file of media contacts in your area. Update these files as you go along. Make notes on them for interaction at later dates with editors, reporters, and news directors. Give priority to media outlets with the greatest audience, those most likely to use church material.
Learning to utilize the media effectively is a little bit like learning how to play violin. It takes a lot of work, and after a while you master the techniques, but they really are tools, and it's a matter of learning how to utilize those tools effectively. But more importantly, that violin has to be tuned to the rest of the orchestra, and it's a matter of orchestrating or learning to conduct an orchestra.
You can't have dozens of people going in there. You have to have one contact. Therefore, if you can have someone assigned to a specific radio station, then that manager of the station or whoever it is you contact at that station is used to you coming. They know you. You've built this rapport. But where you have dozens of people go on, it dilutes the whole thing. So it's very important to have one specific contact.
On a standard daily newspaper of this size, you would go to the city editor. And you need to know the name of the city editor. You need to become familiar with him or her. You need to have a at least name-basis relationship where when he or she thinks about news about the LDS Church in the community, your name will automatically come to mind. And you need to know who that contact person is, too. And it's really important that you know the name and that you spell the name right.
I work with a lot of newspaper and a lot of media in the area. And each one of them, I can call them up and say, "Hi, this is Gary." And they don't say, "Gary who?" And they don't say, "Gary, what do you represent?" This is Gary. They know me. They expect my telephone calls.
First of all, in making contacts with a television station, for a news event, I always will call the assignment desk. And with my background in television news, it's easy to know who to contact, but it's very helpful to know for ward PCDs or state PCDs to know exactly who to talk to. The assignment desk assigns the reporters out to their local beats. And so the assignment editor is the person that you want to talk to and tell them the idea of the story.
The next step is to decide who contacts which media outlet. There should be only one contact person for each media outlet. In smaller towns, one PCD might contact all the media. In cities which have several stakes, assign more experienced PCDs to major media there.
In the Atlanta, Georgia stake, as we have our monthly Stake Public Communications Council meeting, we meet for about an hour or an hour and a half to do training.
Then we have a number of specialists. We have a specialist for news release writing, a specialist for television and radio. We have specialists for various events.
Next, analyze what kinds of stories they run. Notice the sections in your local newspaper. Check out areas in addition to the religion page where your story might best fit. Is there a lifestyle section where a story about a church member or activity could possibly fit? Can you place a notice of upcoming events in, let's say, a community calendar? If the public is invited to those events, would the community be interested? Check your local radio or television station to see if they have community calendars and see how you can send information to them. Once you discover the types of stories a newspaper or radio station will be interested in, the next step is to develop your materials. Materials you prepare usually fall into three categories: fact sheets, press releases, and story ideas. These are the main placement tools of the PCD. A fact sheet provides basic story information in about 1 page. Include your name and phone number at the top of the sheet. List a 1 or 2 sentence summary about the topic of the fact sheet. Then list the facts: the who, what, where, when, why, and how. In short, clear phrases first. Then give other information that would be useful to a journalist in writing the story. Specifics, names, dates, places are essential to a journalist. For example, if a story is about Relief Society, you may want to list how many women belong to Relief Society in your community and worldwide. Be sure to explain the story from a non-member's point of view. Don't use church jargon. Instead of words like steakhouse and ward, use stake center and congregation. Generally, don't use quotes on a fact sheet. Do try to keep it short, about 1 page long. Fact sheets are very helpful if you aren't sure how to write a press release very well. Journalists often will write a story themselves. As long as you get them the basic facts in an organized, coherent fashion, you're actually helping them to do their job better. Many small community newspapers might appreciate your writing a news release about an event. When writing a release, type it on one side of the paper. Use wide margins and doublespace so editors have room to edit. At the top of the page, list the contact person's name and telephone number. Write a headline that indicates the subject of the release, but make it short. The newspaper probably will not use it if they publish the story, but it will help them to quickly get to the story idea. The lead or first paragraph usually is a short summary listing who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then you'll want to develop the story from paragraph to paragraph, listing the most important aspects at the beginning of the story and the least important at the end. Quotes from people involved in the story generally liven up the story and give it more human interest. An easy way to start is to adapt and retype fill-in-the-blank news releases from Salt Lake City.
When I receive a release, I like to be able to look at it immediately and find out what this event is. I'd like a little paragraph that just tells me, how is this significant to what's going on in the world? How is it significant to maybe what's going on with your organization? And just because it's significant to you, that doesn't necessarily transform into significance to all the listeners in that particular area. So try to find a way to express how it's meaningful.
Never make a press release 2 pages long if 1 page will do. Use short, simple words and sentences. Make sure your information is accurate and your grammar and spelling are correct, especially names. Always proofread very carefully.
Sometimes I receive releases where I get 2 pages of background information and an explanation, and by the time I get to the 3rd page, there's the information that I really need right away to make a decision as to where to file it, who to channel it to, and whether to act on it immediately. So be clear in that way.
If your release goes beyond 1 page, Put a page number and a slug line, a word that indicates the topic of the story, on subsequent pages. Put the word more at the bottom of each page, but on the last page type several pound signs, which indicates the item's finished. The third kind of material you might want to develop is the written story idea. A written story idea is one paragraph of a feature article that you want to propose to the editor. It presents the general idea and unique aspects of the story you're proposing. Since features are most often written or produced by print or electronic media people themselves, you're suggesting only an idea you think their audience would be interested in. Once your materials are prepared and you've researched and analyzed the news media, you can now initiate contact with the media in your area. First, make an appointment with the religion or city editor of the local newspaper, or with the assignment editor or reporter of the local radio or television station.
Oftentimes, people would come in almost apologetically. And they would say, I'm not good at this, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not a professional, and I'm sorry, this is not typed, I don't really have this put together well for you, and I'm sure you won't be interested in this, but here it is anyway, I'm supposed to do this. And they would kind of dump it in my lap and leave the newsroom, and by George, they were right. I had no interest in it that way. But then, half an hour later, somebody would come in who would look professional, who would have all the trappings, not in a $200 suit, but would have on a nice shirt and a tie, and would make a decent presentation, would call up in advance and make an appointment, would be professional, understanding that I was busy and had things to do, but also that they were part of my schedule. Their material might be typed, it might also have a few scratch-throughs to indicate where typos were and misspellings were. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't glitzy material, but yet it was in a perfectly acceptable form. And yet these people would also not be $80,000 a year professionals. But yet they had mastered a few little nuances that gave them that difference between being an apologetic housewife coming in and a pseudo-professional concerned Latter-day Saint who was bringing material to me for public dissemination. And the difference from my perspective was great.
When you contact them, know who you're contacting. Overall, be organized. There's nothing worse than having someone call you and say, well, I have this and I don't know. Well, maybe I should, well, I don't know. How about, can you tell me what to do? Don't do it. Know who you want to talk to, what you want to accomplish.
Even though the bishop gave me some excellent materials when he called me to be our ward public communications director. In fact, he gave me a whole box full. He counseled me that answers to prayers would be my most important source of instruction. So I knew that prayer was the first step in initiating a contact with our local newspaper editor. It frightened me to contemplate the importance of having a good relationship with the religion editor at the newspaper. Because I had no real background in journalism, I had plenty of self-doubts about my ability to strike up a positive relationship with a professional news writer. I thought, if I make a bad first impression or say the wrong things, there will be no publication of news about the church in the paper. I didn't want to fail in my calling or let the Lord down. After my prayer, the thought struck me that it was possible for me to say the right things, and that I should not let fear keep me from trying.
Good morning, Daily Journal.
Yes, may I speak with your religion editor, Gerald Richardson, please?
Yes, one moment, please.
I knew his name from reading the paper. I also knew that what little he had written about the church was not particularly favorable. In fact, I felt the paper generally had more interest in writing about controversial issues than about simple everyday events, particularly when it came to news about those Mormons. All I wanted was an appointment to meet him, but I was afraid my insecurity might show.
City desk.
Gerald Richardson?
Speaking.
My name is Rebecca Bradford. I'm the new public communications director for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this area. I'd like to know if I can make an appointment with you to meet with you and briefly discuss how I can be of help to you as a source of information about the LDS Church, the Mormons in this area. What would be a convenient time for you? The long pause made me even more nervous.
Well, the last time a Mormon called me was 2 years ago to complain about a wire service story he thought I wrote. You say you're the spokesperson for the Mormon church here now?
Yes. I've been appointed the public communications director by the local leader in this area of our congregation.
Well, you have a lot of young missionaries I see around from time to time. You still adding new members to your church in this area?
Yes. In fact, because we are growing in this area, and we have many activities that would be of interest to your readers, I thought it would be helpful if we could get together and I could show you how I can be of help as a source of information about the LDS people in this area. When would be best for us to get together for a few minutes and talk?
Well, if you've ever worked as a journalist, you know that the deadlines never let up. I have a lot of copy waiting for entry right now that can't wait.
You know, I think your readers would find some fascinating information in some of the content that I have in a press book that's been prepared for you. And we have some interesting activities coming up that I'd like to share with you. But because of your publishing hour, would it be all right if I brought these things by about 8 o'clock in the morning?
Well, I'll be here then, and we'll see what I can do.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I'll see you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. Bye.
Establish a friendly, service-oriented working relationship. Explain that you've been assigned to be their local contact with the church, and let them know that you're available to assist them. Give them your business card. During that first visit, find out about deadlines, about what they and their readers and listeners or viewers are really interested in, so that you can come up with ideas and stories that will fit their needs. You may want to discuss and leave with them a press book and a well-thought-out story idea.
What about the fear and the anxiety? Oh, heck. Just remember that 1 out of 10 is 100% success. I mean, I'm serious. I can look at our reports over the last 3 years in this region. For every 10 items submitted, if we have 1 used, we're elated. But we're getting up to 2 or 3 for 10 now, sometimes 4 and 5 in a couple of cases. So, it's not the same definition of success you get anywhere else in the church.
When you go into a newspaper, a radio station, a television station, when you go into any media or talk to anybody, be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else.
Someone in our department who can come by and pick it up. Yes? Okay. I'll try to work it out. Thanks. Bye, John. Hello?
Hi.
May I help you?
Yes, I have an appointment with Gerald Richardson.
May I tell him your name?
Rebecca Bradford.
Just a moment. Yes, Rebecca Bradford's here to see you. Fine, I'll tell her. Uh-huh. He'll be with you in just a moment if you'd like to just wait.
Thank you. I gained confidence from the thought that I had been called and set apart by the priesthood to accomplish this calling. This helped me as I saw the religion editor for the first time.
Are you Miss Bradford?
Yes, I am.
I'm Gerald Richardson. I'm the religion editor for the Daily Journal.
Thank you very much for your time. I thought that this press book might be of help to you in answering some of the questions that your readers naturally have about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I've also typed up some story ideas which might be of interest to your readers.
Well, fine. Well, come on back to my desk,
Thank you.
and we'll talk about some of them.
All right.
There's some questions I'd like to ask you about your church.
As I started to understand a little bit about the workings of a newspaper, I came to understand why things were published about the church the way they had been in the past. His only source had been the National Wire Service, and he printed what he did because he didn't know where to get more accurate and complete information. I started thinking a little more like news people think, and found out how difficult it is to capsulize the church and the doctrine in brief articles with only distant source material to work from. But the thing that excited me the most was the realization that he could start looking to me for story ideas that would be fascinating to his readers, even though it's common among church members.
After you've made these basic contacts, get to know other journalists
such as a lifestyle editor or features reporter or even entertainment and sports writers, since our church programs and activities often lend themselves to treatment by editors and reporters in fields other than religion. Now that you've made that first contact, don't let reporters or editors forget who you are. Maintain that contact. Be a friend. Stay in touch. Visit reporters and editors occasionally. Follow up ideas with a phone call occasionally. Here are a few other tips that will be helpful to you in dealing with news media representatives.
Talk to the religion writer so that he doesn't feel like you've obviated him, but say, look, I have a story that I think might be of interest to the sports department. Can you recommend somebody to me, or refer me, or walk me over there and say, you know, this is my friend Emily Swinson, and she's a very, very good contact person for us, and she has something that might be of interest to you. And you've broken more ice then than it would take you years to develop.
In dealing with the media, one thing we have to be aware of is that you're going to be rejected. It's just part of the business. Anyone who's ever written articles or stories or submitted anything anywhere, you've got to go through some rejection. You're not going to be accepted every time. And I am afraid that many times members of the church take this personally. They feel like, well, they don't like me. They don't like Mormons. They're anti-us. And so therefore they either stop doing what they're supposed to be doing, or else they become over-aggressive in doing it. They try to compensate by being pushy. But you just have to realize that media people are in business. They have a job to do. They're getting flooded all the time with information, much of which they don't need. Or if it's useful information today, maybe it won't be useful information tomorrow. Or they may reject it today, and 6 months from now suddenly think, gee, I wish I had a story exactly like the one you sent them 6 months ago. Things change, and you just have to realize that you just keep going, keep trying, keep putting the information out there in the best way possible, and you'll have a high percentage. The more you put out, the more will be accepted.
I think the press, particularly the news channels of communication, are fascinated by Mormonism. And it never ceases to amaze me in press relations, in our efforts here institutionally, of that interest. The phones never stop ringing. Why are you building a temple here? What is the purpose of missionary work? Why are there differences between your faith and other faiths? What is your position on public issues? It just is constant. And I think we can take advantage of those legitimate, sincere, honest questions by providing information that is accurate and forthright and relevant.
The first thing you need to do is don't come in and say, I know you don't want to have anything to do with me, I know you don't like the church. Assume that the reporter wants to do a story that you want them to do. Don't start off with a negative, start off with the positive. Assume that the reporter is looking for a story from you. Go in with a very coherent and very clear understanding of what it is that you want. It's very difficult for me as a reporter and as a religion editor to be dealing with folks, and I'm sitting there frustrated because I know they want to communicate, but they've got so much information and it's so cloudy that I can't understand it. Say very clearly, this is the story idea I have, this is what I have in mind, and these are the dates, the times, this is all the material that you will need. Are you interested? What can I do to help you do this story? It depends on who the person is. Some papers, the reporter will simply say, thanks for the information, give it all to me and take it all down. Others will say, let's explore this.
But then if he decides in his wisdom or her wisdom that it's not a story, don't be offended by it. Don't, and for Pete's sake, don't call them back up and fuss at them for not using it. But do call them. Call them back up and say, if you thought it was a good news story and you felt like it should have gone in, it doesn't hurt a whit to call up and say, and I'm sorry that I gave you that and it wasn't usable. Could you give me some guidelines? What would you like to see? What are the kind of things that we might be doing that you think would be newsworthy? How can I better help you? What can I do in my job as a PCD that will give you more information? What are the types of things that your editors are looking for? What constitutes news, in your opinion?
when I go in the first time to meet any media person, I always take a copy of the press book that the church puts up, because it covers all of our positions on everything. And I'm really thankful for the first page. It answers the question, are Mormons Christians? This gets that out of the way pretty fast, because that's what they're going to ask you. And with their permission, we usually give them a gift subscription of the church news. That way they get that weekly, and it keeps them on top of what's going on in the church, and we see something in there, we can call them and relate it to them and discuss it.
Everything that I see, everything I read in the paper, I think, how does this affect the church? How could it affect the church? How would the Savior like us, the people of his church, to react to this? And then I try to react that way.
But I find that there are very few stories coming out of my area of responsibility, Washington, D.C. and New York, where at least they don't pay the courtesy call and say, this is happening, is this accurate? A lot of this is a result of the fact that when they're not accurate, I let them know they're not accurate. I call and I say, I need to come in and we need to talk. And I take the statistics and the figures, and I don't berate them, but I do say, I know that you want to be responsible. I know you want to have accurate information, and this is important to you to know this. They need to know somebody's out there watching, but we can't, we have to be careful, and we have to be friendly, and we have to operate with a great deal of understanding.
Letter to the editor signed by me as the regional PCD with the approval of the priesthood line as well as the staff line. That will get the kind of thing we want to have for the church, out where it needs to be. That is public communications, being sensitive to how they feel, what they need, and then figuring out some way to adapt your agenda to what their needs are. If you don't pay attention to their needs, you're never going to get through the door. Remember, they're people too.
I don't ask anyone to be fair, because fair is judgmentative. I say all I ask is that you be accurate, and if you're dealing with controversy, that you keep that controversy in perspective with the overall population. If all of the community is upset, make it your whole story. If only 10% of the community is upset, let's make it only 10% of the story. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it gets things in perspective, and they understand that we're working at a professional level.
When you deal with newspaper people or television people or radio people or anybody in the media, you don't ask to see the script before the interview, because you never will. You don't ask to see the article before it's printed, because you never will. You don't ask them to make corrections because of bad information, because you're the one that gave them the information. You go in and say, you have an article in the paper that states some facts that are incorrect, and I'm sure that your paper wants to print the truth. And they say, yes, we do. And you tell them the truth, and they print the article. It's just as simple as that. If you go in big-footed stomping out fires, you're going to get kicked back out of the office, because they don't want to talk to people like that.
Finally, when your local paper or station runs an item that reflects favorably on the church, or when they properly balance a story that could reflect negatively on the church, commend them. Be sincere, but don't overdo it.
It's time now for more questions from you. Again, let's consider the questions that we just talked about. Your initial contact with reporters, editors, or producers. We'll also take questions about the preparation of the materials that we've discussed, the fact sheet, the news release, and the story idea. We've added one more panelist to take your questions. He is Brother John Golston, former religion editor of the Orlando Sentinel. Now let's take some phone calls. Before we do that, let me remind you one more time of our telephone numbers. If you're calling from outside Utah, 1-800-521-5105. If you're calling within Utah, area code 801-531-5849. By the way, that Utah call, please call collect. We have a caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, please. Go ahead.
This is Laurel Rosen calling from San Jose, California. I don't think our newspaper has a religion editor. Who would I see in that circumstance?
Brother Golston.
what you'll need to do is find who would be responsible for covering religion news. That would might be the managing editor, it might be the metro editor or city editor. An easy way to find that is to use the receptionist. Contact the receptionist and say, I've got some religion news, who's the contact person? And they'll tell you, give you a name, and then you've got an N.
Great. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your call. How and when do PCDs set up local news conferences? I used to work in the media, and there were news conferences every day. It seems like they've almost been abused. Sister Poole, we'll ask you, and then we'll ask Brother John that question. How does the news conference work?
Well, I believe that if you're going to call a news conference, it has to warrant it. It has to be some hard news, something that's happening right now. Otherwise, I think it's not worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Brother John?
That's correct. The news media has become very jaundiced about press conferences in general, and it's important to make sure that when you do call one, that it's worth the shot, and then your credibility will be increased a great deal by that. Announcement of a temple being constructed in your area would merit that, but a new stake president would not. You'd want to handle that through conventional sources.
Great, thank you. We have a caller. Jerry, go ahead.
I was just going to interrupt. You might tie it to some event. For example, down in Fort Worth and Dallas, they recently had a marvelous dance festival, and a short tile before it, in effect, it was a news conference, but it was an event. They took one of the dancing groups from a certain ward that was preparing. They went to a center in downtown Fort Worth and staged a portion of the dance festival. And because there were youth, there were ethnic qualities about it, and they did it in the open. It was visual. That, in effect, was a news conference to tell about this event, but not in the typical kind of way. That's the way to do it.
So a news conference isn't always sitting behind a table and chairs and speaking.
The balloon event that we saw, that was news because the young women leaders and the public communications directors got the people together and they made their statement there. It provided time for interviews, but it wasn't tied to this formal kind of news conference, which, as John said, is really, unless you have a major announcement, it's not going to work.
Great. We do have a caller on the line. If you'd state your name and give us the location you're calling from, please.
Hi, this is Nancy Kramer from North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I wondered, when do you have press conferences, and how do you have them? What do you do to prepare for them?
We kind of briefly brushed across that again. Brother John, why don't you maybe...
Again, a press conference needs to be of a big enough nature so that it would kind of take care of itself. If you've got a press type of event, which is what Brother Cahill was talking about, those I think are much more effective and can be orchestrated well by local media. If you will simply create an event that will draw their attention, then you don't need to do a lot of staging. They'll take care of that themselves. You just provide the wherewithal, give the event, and let them cover it. And it's almost automatic in that vein.
Great. Let me ask the stake president, and then Sister Poole can follow up. How do we determine what PCD is assigned to which media outlet?
The very best thing for us to do is to utilize people that have particular types of skills. If we have someone that's really strong with the print media, we should use them. In our area, we have some radio personalities that help in the radio area, TV people with TV, and some newspaper people that do the print media, and it works very effectively. We assign by capability.
Sister Poole?
And I think many times the tendency is to assign the person that's in the stake where the newspaper is published, but oftentimes we found that newspapers go across even 4, 5, 6 stake boundaries. That's in Southern California. So you choose the person who has already developed a rapport with the newspaper, who is working with that newspaper, or if not, then you assign one PCD, never any more than one, contacting that newspaper. Now that doesn't mean that the other stakes cannot use that newspaper. It means that there is just one person assigned to do the contacts with that newspaper.
Great. We have another caller on the line. If you'd state your name and your location, please, go ahead.
My name is Larry Jenkins. I'm PCD of the Walnut Creek, California stake.
Your question, please.
Yes, you just showed on the video a press book that was handed to the religion editor. We were interested in I understand you have an updated press book. Is that correct?
Brother Cahill.
Yes, we do. We have one, and it has a lot of information, and then we supplement it with, for example, annual statistical material and other material that would be helpful. And you can get that by addressing your request to the zone manager, who is your contact here at headquarters.
Great. We have another caller. If you'd give us your location and state your name, please. I guess we have a little technical difficulty. Let me ask this question. Is the local PCD program an extension of the missionary effort? Actually, are they out to convert the masses, or are they providing a service to try to answer legitimate questions people may have for the church?
Well, I think that they can work with the missionary program in softening the door, in preparing the way. They're speaking to thousands, where the missionary program is one-to-one, but it is a marvelous opportunity to prepare things so that when the missionaries knock on that door, they say, oh, I saw this great story in the newspaper, and they let you in.
President.
I think it's very important for us to realize that we have some internal things where we can help our people to feel better about being Latter-day Saints also. I'm much more enthusiastic about those things I'm up on, and if we help with internal communications, I think our people are going to be very excited about sharing the gospel message with their non-member friends as well.
I think we have to keep in mind that the public communications work of the church does not stand alone. The reason for its existence is to support the three great missions of the church by providing accurate, timely information about the church, and some of that will bear directly on missionary work, others will have an indirect effect. By publicizing the presence of missionaries in the community, that assists it. By telling about open houses that may be scheduled for non-members, by inviting people to participate in Relief Society activities or other special events, that all has an impact. And then, of course, with the doctrine of the church is more and more in the news today, and certainly if we can let people understand what the doctrine is, that will have a direct impact also in the awareness and the acceptance, the understanding of what the church message is. So we don't have a separate existence. We're tied with all of the programs of the church in a supporting measure, sometimes more directly, sometimes indirectly.
We have another caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, go ahead, please.
This is Elder Cheshire from Wairika, California.
And your question, please.
Okay, in the ward that I'm serving in is, we have a convert who's his new calling is communications director. We're just wondering a few points on his job and what his calling is, and if we could get a press package for him, if that's possible.
Sister Poole?
Well, I think that the first thing that he needs to do is go through all the materials that are available to him, study what the program is, sit down with his priesthood leader and talk with him on the importance of the program, and ask for his assistance in the program.
Great. President, were you going to expound on that?
I really think the important thing is to get our people trained, and when we have opportunities for training, let's do them. It looks like a good one.
Great, great. We have another caller. Go ahead, please. State your name and give us your location if you would.
Hi, I'm Barb Augustiniak. I'm calling from Sheboygan, Wisconsin branch in Appleton State.
Great. Your question, please.
Because I work full-time, I usually drop off the articles, at the newspaper for the receptionist in the morning. Is there any way I can get to know an editor on a person-to-person basis? Because I'm working for full-time, it's kind of hard to do that.
Brother Golston, perhaps you can feel that.
Well, obviously the face-to-face relationship is the best one to develop, but in this sort of scenario, I think that that telephone contact is the next best. And I would recommend developing that as strongly as possible, making a frequent telephone contact and by mail. Keep things coming into that editor. And an occasional opportunity to actually get into to see that editor after hours. Chances are, if it's a morning paper, he's there till 9:30 or 10 at night anyway. And if you're courteous about his deadline times, maybe you can meet him as soon as he gets out of that situation, and just press the flesh once or twice, and then maintain those contacts by phone, I would think.
Great. Let me review these telephone numbers once again. We really do appreciate your calling us today. Calling outside Utah, the number is 1-800-521-5105. If you're calling within Utah, the number is 801-531-5849, and you're calling collect. We have another caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, please. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, my name is Sister Millerson. I'm calling from Oshawa State, Canada.
Great, and your question today?
I was hoping that you could address the importance of sending photographs along with your news articles, and also whether or not you should have the newspaper send someone out to take the photographs or sending in your own.
Great, thank you. I think Sister Poole and Brother John could probably answer that. Sister Poole?
Photographs are extremely important for the small local newspapers. The major newspapers usually like to come out and take their own. And so I think that photographs are wonderful, and every state should have a photographer. And I think you should consider the major networks, major news sources, that they do their own.
That's completely correct from my perspective. Also, there's, however, I think it would be a good idea, regardless of the size of the paper, to maintain a file of mugshots of the stake presidency, members of the High Council, bishops in the stake, so that if you do a story and have very little time to get someone into the mill of getting a photograph of them, at least you've got a mugshot, and always make those mugshots available to the media, because they're very, very useful in newspaper work particularly, and sometimes very difficult to arrange.
Great, thank you.
And sometimes all they do is the pictures with captions under them. The pictures are valuable.
Let's take another call. Go ahead, caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, please.
This is Randall Morgan, and I'm in Twin Falls, Idaho. I'm the regional PCD. I realize that it's headquarters' job to respond to inaccuracies in wire service stories, but still, we have to live with the results of those inaccuracies right here. What can we do, even though our local editors aren't responsible for those stories, what can we do to help correct those inaccuracies?
Brother Cahill.
You need to gather the correct information. We're more than well pleased to help you from church headquarters to give you the correct information, and then you should go to the editor yourself and present the information in a polite way, but in a full way, and ask him, in the interest of balance and of correcting, to make that correction. They're most anxious to do that, generally, as has already been suggested in the training film, to do it in a direct but polite way, and appeal to their professionalism. No one knowingly wants to do that. No editor that I'm aware of would do that deliberately, and would be more than pleased to correct inaccuracies.
Thank you. We appreciate the calls. Let's take another caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, please.
Hi, my name is Paul Burgess, and I'm from the new Walney Creek East Stake. Recently, on a local television station, they've shown an anti-Mormon film on 2 consecutive Sundays. What would be the best way to approach the station and suggest to them or present to them some good church material that would present a positive image?
Brother Cahill?
We have a great deal of information in our department that's available to you through your zone managers of material that would help you make a presentation to the television station. I think it's important to stress the tradition in America of religious toleration, and we have some good things from the National Council of Conference of Christians and Jews, from the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, and you should take that, and then you might, rather than demand a straight one-for-one retraction or equal time, we have some positive materials that you could suggest. You might even suggest a local some local spokesman on a talk show or some such thing that would present a viewpoint from the church that would be helpful, without getting into a one-on-one argument about the particular offensive film.
Always trying to keep a very positive
Always
approach
a
to
positive approach. Use this as an opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons.
Great. We have another caller. Go ahead, state your name and give us your location.
My name is Fran Hunter, and I'm from the Edmonton Riverbend Stake in Alberta, Canada.
Yes, your question, please.
I have a two-part question. One, we were concerned with newspaper items where someone commits a crime or a felony, and it's always mentioned that he or she is a member of the church, and we were getting a little bit of bad publicity from that. We were wondering how we might counteract that, if someone had a comment. And the second part of my question, there are other areas that we could gain favorable publicity with regards to service groups and other things in the community, and I was wondering if someone on the panel had some comments as to how to maybe approach that particular aspect of it.
Thank you for your question. I think, Brother Cahill, the camera's on you. You can answer the first question, and perhaps Sister Poole, the second half of that question.
I think we might ask, does the fact of church membership really have any relationship to the story? We do have to keep in mind, however, that this is a two-edged sword. We have taken perhaps an overwhelming sense of pride in the accomplishments of Latter-day Saints, and again, the religion may or may not play a part in that. And so I guess it comes with the territory that the other side of the coin comes with that when our people who are expected to do better and be better get in some trouble, it's not unusual that they might be so identified. And so we have to take that with a bit of calmness. But if it's a blatant misuse of the religious aspect, again, we go and we appeal to them on their sense of fairness. Does that really have is it an element of the story that's necessary? Would you say that same thing where had the person been a Catholic or a Jew, cast in that context, and they might see themselves that it really wasn't appropriate?
Sister Poole, the second half of that.
Well, I think in providing service, we have wonderful things going on in our church that can be very helpful to the community. For instance, our preparedness fairs, our earthquake preparedness. And I think that what we can do and what we have done is to send out flyers, send them out in the community by the missionaries, have them tracked with them. We had one event where we had 2,000 people come to a fair that we had.
Great, thank you. We really do appreciate and value your calls. We'll be taking some more calls a little later. Right now, we'll take a 10-minute rest break.
During this break, if you're recording this program, now's the time to change tapes. Again, during this break, if you're recording this program, now is the time to change your videotape. Thank you. Now let's look at the various opportunities that are available to local public communication directors. These opportunities can be used individually or collectively in order to get the widest possible use of your story idea. These opportunities cost no money, only your time and creativity. Fast-breaking news. The first section of a newspaper and lead stories of a newscast are generally reserved for major fast-breaking or spot stories. The fast-breaking story can occasionally offer opportunities for placement. Such stories would generally center on a local event in which the local church is involved. For example, if the local church were involved in relief efforts during a flood or natural disaster, the city editor may well be interested in facts surrounding the church's involvement. That information is best conveyed to the newspaper or editor over the telephone. Then call the radio and television station and explain the church's involvement in the fast-breaking news story. It's even possible that the news editor or reporters might be looking for information from the church on fast-breaking stories in which the church is involved. This is one good reason to make contact with the local media and keep them updated on who to contact if they need someone. Remember, getting the facts to the news media immediately is a major factor in working with fast-breaking stories.
The temple was held hostage. Of course, we had 2 days of total media blitz and many, many, many interviews. It was a wonderful opportunity to talk about the temple and to dispel the myths and the fear of secrecy. In every interview, I was able to talk about what we do in the temple, about what a marvelous experience it is. I was able to invite everyone to come to our visitor centers, to be there at Christmas, to be on our grounds during the year because we have such beautiful grounds. All of the interviews were very, very positive, and in fact, it was interesting. One of the major media powers in our city, who I happened to see at a party right after that, said, "I couldn't believe the way you led that interviewer around by the nose." It happened to be his own channel person. And I said, "I didn't at all. I talked about the things your viewers wanted to hear about." And he said, "Right on."
By far, the greatest local opportunity for placement of information about the church is through interesting features. Sharing a good story idea verbally or in written form with the local news media can often lead to a full-length feature story. This is true with the print media as well as with radio and television stations.
We have full-time missionaries in our area all the time, but if you put an article in the paper every week about the new missionary coming to town, that can, not every week, but when new ones come and go, that can get very uninteresting and nobody will read them. And so I tell our directors to get to know the missionaries and really interview them and find something interesting. And when you find someone that has an interesting story, do a story on that missionary, but don't do one all the time. They'll be much more interested in reading about a missionary who's going home that his hometown will be gone, like the Teton Dam has washed it away, or if a missionary's there from England.
This means that we have a very real responsibility not only in trying to get positive stories to the media, developing good relationships with the media, tying our events and news events with current happenings so that they are newsworthy. And for example, we had the wonderful balloon ceremonies that the young women did all over the church. It happened to be on the day that the president went to Iceland for peace talks. Here in our area, we tied that to it. We launched the balloons from the Washington Monument, and we got a 5-minute piece talking about what the tremendous concern our young people have in peace and the wonderful goodwill they have, and the fact that this church is doing something very positive in creating messages of peace.
We have a public communications director here that's done this with her papers, her mom and pop, her local weeklies. All she has to do is pick up the phone and she gets 50 inches like that. Guaranteed on anything she gives them. The Godmakers was shown in her ward area about a year ago, and they bought paid advertisements in the paper to put the Godmakers on. And so she calls the editor and says, "We just got a new Relief Society president. You want to do a story on the Relief Society president? Let me tell you about the Relief Society." So here's this little ad about the Godmakers down there and this full-page feature story on the Relief Society president. That's how you offset it.
Some ideas that are worthy of feature space or time include the local genealogy program, a day in the life of a missionary, family home evening, the church satellite system, the youth programs of the church, programs for children, the calling of a new local relief society president, and many other story topics. In short, feature ideas are abundant if you look for them. Radio and television stations often have programs that specialize in reporting on local features. Sharing a good story idea for a feature with the producer of one of these programs can be done over the phone or in a written fact sheet or news release.
Appreciate the opportunity this afternoon of interviewing Elder Ronald S. Jolly, who's the regional representative of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints of the Salem region, an area which covers 1/3 of the state of Oregon. As we talk today, our objective is to inform our viewers of the doctrines, policies, and practices of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You probably saw it. When the Celtics clinched the championship, it was champagne all around. Well, almost all around. Star guard Danny Ainge toasted with soda because his Mormon religion prohibits alcohol. Ainge and Celtics center Greg Kite, also a Mormon, maintain a no-smoking, no-swearing, no-cheating lifestyle, unlike the image many athletes have. Red Sox pitcher Bruce Hurst and Patriot Trevor Maddich also stick to their Mormon beliefs. The headlines may trumpet drug abuse and egoism among pro athletes, but for these guys, it's faith and family first. Later, we'll talk to their wives. Ladies, one of these gentlemen is not married. They'll give us an inside look at the private lives of some of Boston's sports stars. I'm Buzz Luttrell, and this is People Are Talking.
Odyssey, a journey through the religious communities of Southern California.
We're going to meet two members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who have a vital interest in the Hispanic community.
If local producers are interested in doing a feature involving the church, PCDs can be of great help in suggesting people to be interviewed. The PCD can then prepare the spokesman before the interview. Many local newspapers and radio stations offer community calendars as free service. They provide an ongoing opportunity for placement of information about the church. Some stations also provide public service announcement time, but only if you're providing a real service to the public. For example, a free no-strings-attached genealogy workshop open to the public. Use the community calendar when you wish to invite the public to events such as a sports tournament, a fireside, or genealogy workshop.
They are short little blurbs, 30 seconds, 60 seconds long, that announce, tell about a program that you're having, inviting the public. This can be done very effectively with Know Your Religion, many of the programs, so even Relief Society.
Secondly, once you get an understanding for that station, and you've determined that that's a station that you would like to be associated with, then you should talk to a public service director there. Public service director can answer some very important questions for you and give you some idea as to what your next step might be.
You need to have people working on the community councils. You need to have your youth going out and, like we've got a stake here in Seattle that goes out and cleans part of the zoo every year. We had a group over in the Redmond Stake that last year built a barn for a non-member. Got on 3 television stations and a front page of the local paper over there and several other papers. We need to do things that are Christ-like because we should be Christ-like. We need to be more involved within the community and not just expecting the community to like us because we're nice people. They don't like us because we're nice people because nobody told them we're nice people. We have to show them we're nice people.
But the most effective thing that we can do is to let our light shine in such a way that they write about us. We have a press clip service here in Southern California, so I have the privilege of going through all those clips. And the ones that really excite me are the ones in which a reporter tells about a scout group who've gone out and cleaned up a park, or where the youth have gone into rest homes and they have provided service and love. And that's what the gospel is all about. And I think that in the community affairs end of public communications is where we can really shine.
Use a fact sheet to get in the community calendar. Get the name of the person in charge of the community calendar and send a fact sheet on a regular basis. Another excellent placement opportunity is the radio and television talk show. Producers and hosts of talk shows are always looking for interesting and unique topics. Listen to and watch the talk shows in your area and determine which seem to be hosted by fair-minded people. But be wary of call-in talk show formats.
The type of people that make good talk show guests or interviews are those that have an interesting story to tell, a story that may help you avoid a situation they experienced, something to enhance your health, your welfare, your pocketbook, something funny, something informative. People who are good communicators, people who have a little bit of dynamic nature to them, although everyone doesn't have to be a performer.
If a local public communications director has a contact with a local talk show producer or host, they may be interested in doing an interview, for example, with a representative from the largest genealogy library in the world. We can bring that representative into this studio, and over telephone lines, that person will sit here and be interviewed on that local talk show and answer questions about genealogy, the genealogy library. So the local public communications director kind of becomes the representative or the salesperson, if you will, for the availability of institutional church spokespersons.
Avoid talk shows which are centered in controversy and conflict. Consider ones that focus on topics which help the listening audience better cope with life, relationships, money, and other relevant human concerns. As a PCD, you can approach the talk show producer or host with interview ideas.
As I've been listening to your talk show, I've been intrigued by the subject matter that you've been talking about recently, and also by the information a lot of your guests have to offer.
Thanks. It's nice to know someone's listening.
Because you regularly talk about topics of importance to the community here, I wanted to suggest another important topic that I think would be of interest to your listeners, and also suggest an excellent guest that I think would address that topic very well.
Well, actually, I'm pretty well booked up for the next little while, but why don't you tell me a little more?
Well, I've noticed that drug and alcohol abuse among teenagers has received a lot of interest lately, and yet there's a group of teenagers right here in our city that have a substantially lower rate of drug and alcohol abuse because they'd rather spend their time planning and doing service projects like cleaning up the trash along the freeway or doing yard work for the handicapped. They'd rather spend time doing that than being into drugs and alcohol. Now, their leader would be an excellent talk show guest for you, I think, along with maybe some of the youth themselves. Would that be interesting to you on the air?
Oh, I guess it could be, but tell me, how old are these kids?
Well, they range in age from 12 to 18 years old, and that's right in the prime age group when a lot of their peers have the most problems with drug and alcohol. And yet they have a substantially lower percentage of abuse than their peers do. Now, their leader is a Dr. Michael Brandt, who is in the psychology department at the university. Well, he speaks from two perspectives. One is an expert on the worldwide trends of drug and alcohol abuse, but also from the perspective of a church leader who counsels with the youth, spending many hours each week, and also oversees programs and activities that help them a great deal. Could I set a time when he could meet with you?
Wait a minute, what exactly did this fellow do to make such a big difference to the kids he works with?
What he does is, he is in addition to being a university professor, he is a youth leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church.
Local television talk shows may also be an excellent placement opportunity. A local church representative could participate in a discussion of public issues or religious concerns. The spokesman training course can be very useful in preparing local representatives to appear on both radio and TV talk shows.
One of the biggest things we can do is to take advantage of the skills and the talents of our members. Most places you go has at least one talk show in town, maybe two stations that do talk shows. Now, they have to fill that air with talk every day. Now, in our case here, we have one that does a good job with talk shows, but they don't want anybody they don't want to get into religion on the station, which a lot of them don't. So you get into everything else. I bring somebody over that does Japanese genealogy, and we talk about Japanese genealogy, or somebody that's into Indians, or somebody who's into music, or if they're into optometry. Listen to the station, find out what kind of things they're talking about.
Local cable television access channels can be a good opportunity for guest interviews. Most, however, have very small audiences, so time and efforts with local access television stations should be carefully weighed against what might be accomplished in devoting your time and energy to placement of items with a large audience.
When an individual religion approaches a program manager or cable manager requesting airtime, if they have a lot of channels, they're usually very anxious for you to provide their programming, even provide studio time. But if a cable company has a limited amount of channels, or if there's too many people asking, too many different religions asking, sometimes it's a little hard for them to decide how to divide the cable time.
We need cable specialists because the cable systems do offer free training. You can use their cameras. You can. He was over in Fullerton with their Christmas program. They were able to borrow the cameras and film their Christmas program, and then it was put on cable.
We have been very much aware that there are some restrictions in the programming material as far as the legal aspects of broadcasting to make sure there's no residuals or copyrights. So we work very closely with the Church Public Communications to make sure we follow their guidelines.
Local papers or stations often are willing to report on organizations which sponsor events with community value. For example, a National Family Week, a church activity for terminally ill children, an emergency preparedness seminar conducted by the paramedics at the local stake center are all good events which PCDs have found rather easy to widely publicize in the media. Co-sponsor promotions with local organizations.
One of the other more successful things that we've done that really helps to show what we can do in interacting in the community, we have 3 wards within one county in my stake, in Clayton County. And we worked with them on a project for National Family Week, and they did a Family of the Year program, and it was really successful. There were close to 300 people there, and over half of those were non-members.
The Make-A-Wish organization, which is terminally ill children, and the youth of Tustin 3 Ward provided a dinner and a program for these children when they came down here to go to Disneyland. And then they put on a Charlie Brown musical.
Sometimes local magazines will be interested in calendar items or even ideas for feature stories. First, see what kinds of stories the magazine prints. Then present a relevant story idea to the editor. If he or she likes it, they'll usually assign a staff member to write it.
Letters to the editor is another place that I think we really don't take advantage of enough. The letters to the editor are probably the second most read place in the paper. And I've taken advantage of this several times.
If you see a letter to the editor that says something contrary or anti the church, don't get all up in arms. Don't start making irate phone calls or writing nasty letters or threatening to cancel your subscription.
In addition to these placement opportunities, the Public Communications Department produces a weekly radio newscast. PCDs can arrange with radio stations to pick up this newscast, which is available over satellite or over toll-free telephone lines. The Public Communications Department also produces audio and videotapes for local radio, television, and cable placement. These programs focus on issues like state-sponsored lotteries, pornography, teaching values to children, religious tolerance, and other topics. These timely videotapes and audio tapes may be obtained from the Public Communications Department.
The church in recent months has initiated a public affairs program called Times and Seasons. In that program, we deal with substantive issues. Why is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints opposed to pornography? Why
are state-sponsored lotteries wrong and immoral? What do they do to the public? These are the kinds of messages that we can deal with both institutionally and locally to use the media to its greatest power to influence the public for good.
What we've discussed so far have been unpaid, free space and time placements. Those local church units which have the money and desire to pay for placement of advertisements may consider newspaper inserts and drop-in ads. These ads can communicate a more direct gospel message to the public.
We felt that by developing a freestanding insert, very similar to a shopping insert that many people are familiar with receiving in their daily paper, might be an effective way to deal with the negative aspects of the image of the church in this area and also deal with certain specific doctrines.
As we go out and meet the people, the circular gives us an opportunity to talk something with them, to communicate with them, something that they have seen, something that they have felt as they have looked at it, gives us an opportunity to build a good relationship of trust at the door. And when we have that good relationship of trust at the door, we are then able to overcome some of the problems that they may have had in their minds beforehand and make it easier in our door approaches to get in and to present something to them.
Most of your placement opportunities will be free, however. The only cost involved will be your creative effort, your persistence, and your follow-through. The key to placing information about the church in the print and broadcast media is simply do your homework. Get to know your local media sources. Know their expectations. Know what their interests are all about. Then develop materials which appeal to those interests. And finally, follow through to make the necessary contacts.
The same principles with us, of course, are basically you read the materials that you've been given. You look for scriptural references to what you're doing in your calling, and there are many of them. You study what the doctrine of public communications is. You, of course, you're familiar with the mission of the church, and you try to tailor all your activities toward those ends.
And, you know, we can't always measure. I think that leaders are sometimes inclined to think, well, how many were baptized? But that isn't the purpose of public communications. The purpose of public communications is to soften the door for the missionary so that there will be baptisms happen. Therefore, when we do some of these things, and we're asked that question, you know, we can't always say, well, there were 100 baptisms because of this supplement we put out. But we don't know what effect that has had on someone that has read it and years later perhaps are baptized through it.
Spend some time every day sitting at your desk or your kitchen table or wherever you work, writing down things, make to-do lists, make follow-through lists. Think of yourself as an executive because in a sense you are a public relations person. You are a PR account executive. So act like an executive. Get yourself organized, motivated, and then when you go out to do your job, you'll do a better job because you've got the priesthood, you've got the power of prayer and the leadership of the church, and you've got your own initiative and guidance and help from the Holy Spirit to help you.
We've had many unusual and wonderful things happen here, and I know that they are not because I am Beverly Campbell. They are because, as Beverly Campbell, I have done everything I could do. I have been as smart as I could be. I have used the people and resources available to me to the greatest extent that I could, and then I have called on the Lord, and he said, all right, if you've done everything you can do, I'm going to open that door for you. And I have seen doors open that simply should not have opened as a result of not my doing, but the Lord's doing. So we cannot say, this is not a job that you can get on your knees and then just say, okay, do it, because it's not going to be done. You have to do your homework, and you have to work very, very hard, and you have to be very courageous. But if you've done all of that, and if you're also humble, the work will go forward, and the doors will open, and the bridges will be built, and it will be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity we have to spread the message of the gospel.
More than anything, the greatest joy I felt
But sometimes in public communication, you don't see direct results. You're planting the seeds oftentimes. And to have someone come up and say, I joined the church because of the media that you had the last couple of weeks. And to have someone come up and say, I watched that talk show, I watched the news, I saw all this LDS response, and I wanted to know more. I thought it was such a great lifestyle, and they were so dedicated, these people that were talking about it, that I wanted to change my life and become like that. That, to me, is the greatest reward of this calling that I've ever had.
We'd now like to take additional questions that you might have. Let me reiterate these numbers once again. Calling within Utah, you can call collect area code 801-531-5849. Outside Utah, 1-800-521-5105. Now, before we go to those calls, I have one question here I'd like to ask Brother Cahill about public service announcements. We often hear about those. PSAs, they're called in the business. Public communication directors often call headquarters and say, can I place a PSA with my local cable or television station, or can I place music in the spoken word?
The Public Communications Department and the Public Communications Directors are not responsible for placing those materials because of a whole range of reasons. If there seem to be opportunities that are available, the Public Communications Director should direct that recommendation to the department, and it will be considered, and then appropriate action taken that may or may not involve the Public Communications Directors at that point.
Okay.
May I say one thing about public service announcements? You can create your own. We had 108 run in a period of 3 weeks for National Family Week on our local radio station. So you can create your own public service announcements, and the radio stations are very cooperative.
Great. All right. Let's take your calls. Caller, if you'd state your name and give us your location today, please.
This is Don Reynolds, Simi Valley, California. And my question is, what is the feeling of the panel on a stake purchasing column space in a local newspaper on an ongoing basis to run a kind of local spoken word, giving more direct insight into our teachings and doctrines?
Thank you. Sister Poole?
We did that in Orange County, and we ran every week ads, and they were very well received. We put the number of the mission office on the ads and offered free booklets to the public, and they ran for a full year.
Great.
Very successfully.
All right, let's take a...
We just might add to that, there are some areas of the country, I know in Brazil it's happened, where newspapers have volunteered the space for that kind of thing that's just been suggested, so it can be done both ways and rather successfully.
Great. Another caller, would you state your name and give us your location, please?
Yes, my name is Scott Magnuson. I'm calling from the Arcadia, California stake. My question is, what should the ward PCD do to be more recognized by the bishopric as an important resource to the ward?
Good question for the stake president.
My goodness, that is a good question. I think one of the very best things you could do would be to work through the executive secretary and get on the agenda in some of these meetings where we could be talking about the important things that PCD could do for the ward and the stake.
That's great. Now, we looked at the ecclesiastical point of view. Let's look at the PCD point of view.
Well, I think that they should attend every ward council meeting. I think that they should be to activity meetings so they get lead time. And by making themselves more visible in the activities of the ward, I think then the bishop will recognize the importance of their role.
Great. We have another caller. Please state your name and give us your location.
Hello, this is Catherine Baker from Joplin, Missouri. You spoke earlier of the need to have one spokesperson for each meeting. The newspapers in our home ward is distributed in 4 states. The PCDs we have in the mission field here usually have 2, 3, and 4 other colleagues, primary presidencies, seminary teachers. What can you offer as an encouragement as we build up to the ideal of one spokesperson?
Thank you. Sister Poole, can you feel that?
Well, one spokesperson is really the ideal, and sometimes it's difficult to have. But I think that as PCDs are trained, then they can be assigned to the various newspapers in the area.
Great. We appreciate your calls. Let's take another one. If you'd give us your name and state your location, please. Hello, caller?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead,
This
please.
is Elder Burl McBride, Texas Houston Mission, Port Arthur, Texas.
Yes, sir. And your question?
Yes. On March 7th, there was an article in the Houston Chronicle concerning, I forgot the title exactly, but it was Mormons Don't Pray, something like that. It was a study that was conducted by two professors at BYU. And I don't have the materials in front of me, but they were two, both of them teach at BYU, and the way the story appeared is this, that Mormons are so busy they don't have time to pray. Seems to me that something should be done about this, which is detrimental. It just gives a distorted picture entirely of us. Now, on the same page, there was a very good article about the Mormon Blitz, or the Heavenly Father's plan.
Mm-hmm.
But this other article was just written by the same person, but so written that it portrays the fact that we don't pray because we're too busy.
Elder, if I might ask, what have you done? What initiatives have you taken to try to correct that situation?
I just received the article yesterday.
Uh-huh.
So I've not been able to do anything about it yet.
I see. Well, we're gonna ask that question to a couple people and just give you for instance, we're going to see a PCD in action now. We're going to call upon Sister Poole to say, yeah, that happened in Orange County. What would Sister Poole do?
Well, I first of all would call the editor and draw his attention to it. I would perhaps have some members of the stake write in some letters to the editor concerning the number of hours that they spend on their knees, and that certainly prayer is the very center of our religion.
Mm-hmm. Now, John, as a newspaper man, looking from the other side, what would your point of view be if PCD entered the
Well, there would be some difficulty if this article, in fact, was quoting some BYU professors who were quoting statistics. It would be difficult for PCD to waltz into the newsroom and say, yes, but those figures aren't accurate. I can tell you because I pray a lot and these guys don't know what they're talking about. I think this is the kind of scenario where Brother Cahill indicated maybe what we need to do first is do some good, strong legwork, do our backgrounding, find out what the article really said, what the study said, find out if it's in conflict with some other studies, and then put together a good package that could be presented concisely and accurately. We don't want to give wrong information because that would be far more detrimental than doing nothing. Okay.
But do newspaper men often have times to say, check every UPI or AP story that comes out?
Absolutely not. And there's a prevalent belief that they ought to be able to do that, but the time simply doesn't exist for that. They need to assume that most of those stories are accurate. And how would someone in Texas be able to verify the accuracy of an AP or UPI story that said that two BYU professors had done a study to indicate this? You know, that's an impossibility.
Great. Good scenario. We appreciate that question. Let's take another caller. Hello, caller. If you'd state your name and give us your location, please.
Hello. This is Jerry Fossen from Ukiah, California.
Yes.
And in a lot of your news releases, I've noticed the use of Mormon. And maybe you could give us the guidelines on how we should maybe use the word Mormon, or as our public communications director here in Ukiah has told us, we should use the full name of the church. Maybe you could just make a statement to that effect.
Okay, Brother Cahill.
Yes, our policy is, and our recommendation is that we always use the full name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and avoid the use of Mormon. We would never, in anything we release, use Mormon Church. We recognize that the media may choose to abbreviate it for any number of reasons, but we should always, everything that we goes forth in the name of the church, the full name, in our references. That's our recommendation. We should use Mormon in terms of the Book of Mormon, but always use the full name of the church and recognize that others are going to abbreviate it. And hopefully over time we will change that practice because the name of the church tells so much about what we believe.
Great. Thanks for the call. John, I'd like to pose a question of this. What is a good story to a newspaper man? What's a grabber? What interests you? Does it have to be flamboyant or...
To the contrary. Those things, of course, are wonderful stories, but they come along very seldom. It's not often that we dedicate temples. What really interests most newspaper people are people stories.
Mm-hmm.
They want stories that deal with local citizenry who are doing things of interest to other citizens. Compassionate service type stories, interesting background stories. An older couple going on a mission is a natural because it's an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
Those type of stories cry out and are frequently the ones that we bypass, waiting for the more grandiose.
So we're looking for human interest stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Let's take another call. Hello, caller. You're on the air. If you would state your name and give us your location, please.
Hi, I'm Bill Mammon from Park City, Utah, and I'm the stake PCD. And I'm trying to put together a story on stake welfare sewing. And I'd like to get background information regarding where the material goes from here. And who would I contact to get that kind of information?
Refer your request, I would suggest, to your zone manager. I think in your case it's either Don Russell or Brother Bailey in our department, and they will get that kind of information for you, and we'll reply to you in good order.
Thank you so much for your phone calls. We just don't have enough time to take all of them. This concludes our presentation on media relations. Now let's talk a moment about immediate projects that you can take on. You've received the materials in the mail for an Easter media campaign. There are ad slicks for placement in local newspapers. Some papers will use these ads without charge. Others may ask you to pay. You've also received newspaper inserts appropriate for the Easter season. These are especially effective when coordinated with local missionary efforts. In the Easter campaign kit, there are sample messages that can be adapted for local priesthood leaders to use in your area. And finally, there are 3 30-second written radio announcements. Again, some stations may charge for these, others may not. In order to place these materials well in advance of Easter, we suggest that you meet now at the closing of this prayer, right after this meeting. Meet just for 10-15 minutes and decide who's going to place what, with what newspaper and what station. You may also want to take a few minutes to go over the media calendar in your media relations booklet to plan future events. The Public Communications Resource Catalog contains a wide variety of materials which can assist you in your activities. There are audio tapes and videotapes, fill-in-the-blank news releases, feature stories, and many other valuable resources. You can get this catalog free of charge by writing the Public Communications Department at 50 East North Temple Street, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84150. Before leaving today, please be sure to fill out the evaluation form that you've been given. Priesthood leaders should fill out one side, PCDs the other side. Your evaluation will help us to better meet your needs and how we can help you. Now, we also appreciate lots of mail that we've received, quarterly reports, the clippings, the tapes of talk shows that you've sent us. They're extremely valuable in helping us to evaluate public communication efforts. Please keep them coming. We'd like to thank our panel members today and thank each of you for taking the time to be with us. We hope this has been helpful to you, and we pray for the success to continue. Now, we'd like to close by hearing a message from Brother Richard Lindsay concerning this teleconference.
As we conclude this training session, we reflect on the words of Elder Neil A. Maxwell of the Council of the 12, who said, "The public communications arm of the church will be ever more helpful and will grow more sophisticated with the passage of time. It will play an increasingly important part in the development of the church in the years ahead, but in support of the church rather than having a life of its own. This will include preparing a more receptive climate and also in helping to correct abusive climates. We hope that what we have learned and seen and felt today will assist us to be more competent, more confident, and more effective and better organized in our public communications activities in support of the church. We hope to move forward together now, organizing, initiating, and developing positive relations with newspapers, radio stations, and television stations in those communities where you live. While the preparation and steps you have received today are important, we would emphasize one last element. Overall, our work will succeed, and the perception of us as a church and people will improve in direct proportion to how we mirror the Savior in our lives. No media effort can be successful over the sweep of time unless we as Latter-day Saints are believing, behaving, and serving members of the church. Perhaps the greatest contribution we can make in public communications is by the faithfulness and obedience we demonstrate to Him whom we serve in our callings. God bless you, dear brothers and sisters, I pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.